today's episode?
Talking about being selfish.
Talking about being selfish. It's okay to be selfish. You know that, right?
Like, I know that. I really don't like the word selfish. Obviously, there's this negative connotation, and we've talked about social construction here on the show and how words create worlds. And for me, I understand that it's good to be selfish, but I just can't get behind that word. So I've come up with a reframe for me.
You have come up with a reframe. Before we get to that reframe, though, I just want to make sure you guys know being selfish is actually not a bad word.
I know. Like,
do you though?
But that's why I'm going to reframe it. But we'll get to that in a second.
We can get to the reframing. I just think it's really important that as a society and dear listeners, that we really realize it's not a bad word. It is just a word that we have bastardized and we have made into a pejorative, but it's not actually a pejorative.
Oh my God. Can we just talk about some of these words you're using?
Gosh. You're welcome.
Ooh.
It's early and I'm very caffeinated. So
she is.
This is part of that. But it's not a bad word. And I know it's something that we talk about, you don't want to be selfish. And, there's all these bad connotations with it. But it's really not because, I know we'll get to the reframe here in a minute, but it's something that we already do. In fact, every altruistic act that you do is actually a selfish one. So you think that you're giving, money to a homeless person because you're a good person. No, it's because you're selfish and you want to feel good about you being able to give something. So it's actually all about you all the time.
I mean, it's true what they say. There is no selfless act.
There really isn't. And so it's just... selfish is not a bad word. However, we will reframe it to help our listeners and Melissa right now.
It's mostly for me.
Which is fine, which is totally fine. But reframing, if that helps you get into the mindset of doing more things for yourself, I'm all for it.
Then that's absolutely why I wanted to reframe it. Because, if we're looking at finding ways to be more, dare I say, selfish, it's just hard for me. So I really did some soul searching and came across the term self-oriented. Now, if I say I'm looking to be more self-oriented or it's okay to be more self-oriented, I really feel like I can get behind that.
What do you think self-oriented does for you as opposed to the word selfish?
It's just the negative connotation that we talked about. For me, it just sits wrong with me. And, again, coming back to that social constructionism where words create worlds. If I was trying to say, I'm a selfish person, that's hard for me. But if I say, I'm working to become more self-oriented, or the things or activities or people that I'm engaging with are a gift to myself in me becoming more self-oriented. It's just that different shift, that different mindset.
Okay. So if I were to say you are already self-oriented, how does that sit?
That sits fine. That absolutely sits fine for me.
You are already selfish.
I don't like that. No, don't say that.
Don't say that. Okay. So you are already self-oriented, and dear listeners, so are you. All of us are already self-oriented. We just don't want to recognize it.
Well, and the thing is, it's actually ingrained in who we are. So there's this author, Bob Rosen, and he actually says it's in our nature to put our own needs first, and that it's grounded in our need to survive. I mean, if you look at our ancestors, the instinct was fight or flight. But as humans, we've developed higher order needs, and as a result, we've become a much community-oriented being. And so if you look at like our history as humans, we've moved from nuclear families to tribes to villages, and we would hunt and gather together, we would defend our resources together. And so actions that weren't in alignment with the community were considered shameful. So rather than, looking at things like, okay, you're either community-centered or you're self-oriented, it's actually both and, kind of what you were talking about.
I think it is. I think part of the difference or issue that we need to recognize is that in American culture, we are very individualistic. We don't like to consider ourselves part of the group or a herd and things like that. But guess what? We totally are. And in fact, we're better that way, because when you do have these individualistic tendencies, which are, again, very ingrained in our American culture, it does lend for people to be more selfish and take more resources than maybe would be allotted. So it was really interesting because I came across this research on overfishing. And there are communities throughout the world where they have figured out, hey, fish is our precious resource. This is what we all live off of in the community. We need this. And it is going to be really bad if one person takes all the fish. One, you can't eat all the fish, right? It's going to go bad. Other people are not going to have enough food. And so what they've figured out is that the way to not overfish and to still have this sustainable, precious resource is to actually get the group together, talk about a solution as a group with all people involved. Because, what if one family has a bunch of kids? Well, they're going to need more fish than the single dude that's fishing. Like, it's just the way it works. And so they've been able to figure out through community and really talking with each other and talking with all of the stakeholders, which is, something that I know you do a lot in AI, to come up with a fair solution that is still self-interested, because they're all wanting to keep the fish, but it's a community resource and something that individuals need. So I'm just like, oh, okay. So if you can still be selfish, but in a way for it to benefit the group. That's really the key distinction. Being self-oriented in a group mentality is going to help you be able to stretch things maybe in ways that you didn't know you could.
That's a really great perspective. I never really thought about that in terms of how being self-oriented
yes.
could actually play into the work that I do with appreciative inquiry. But I think, again, social constructionism is huge in appreciative inquiry. And I think the reason why when I'm reflecting on why I have such a negative connotation with it is, like, if you look in psychology, selfishness is often a key characteristic or associated with like narcissism and sociopaths. So obviously for me, again, this is just my perspective. When you're saying like a person is selfish, it's like, okay, well, that person is exhibiting narcissistic behavior. So for me, I think that that's why like that self-oriented word just like resonates with me better. But I know that, it's kind of like on a spectrum, just like boundaries were on a spectrum. So you have, the narcissists and the sociopaths on one side, which are completely selfish. And then you have people pleasers that maybe put the needs of other people's before their own, right? Selfless, I'm doing selfless in quotes, selfless acts that they're putting everybody's needs, wants, desires before their own.
Yes, which is something that we do see with a lot of different people, putting that other relationships with others ahead of the relationships with themselves. And so really what I would invite our audience to do is to prioritize that relationship with the self. That's really what being self-oriented is about. It is about, sorry, how dare someone call me while we're recording? My apologies. But yes, it is indeed about being able to prioritize the relationship with yourself. Because I think a lot of people, when you look at your to-do list or, things that you want to get done, or if you're taking care of others, usually the last person on that list is yourself. And so really when you're being self-oriented, it is about being aware and consciously putting your relationship with yourself at the forefront of your life.
Well, as a recovering people pleaser, I think that it's very hard to even understand or take steps to be more self-oriented. And I came across this really great quote that basically talks about, by being self-oriented, you're actually operating in the spirit of generosity. And I was like, what the fuck does that, what? But the quote, and this is from Psychology Today, says, when you feel like you're lacking, the answer is not always to give others to affirm your trust and abundance. Often, the best thing you could possibly do for yourself when you're depleted is to be selfish. The point is not to do this so you never help others. The point is to give to yourself first so that you're able to help others, not out of obligation or resentment or a forced belief in abundance, but in the true spirit of generosity. So being able to look at it in that way, and I think we've made the metaphor before where it's like, if you're constantly pouring into other people's cups, at the end of the day, you have nothing left in your cup. And so I like what you're saying, which is, okay, if you are a giver, because it feels good to give, right? Especially here around the holidays, it feels good to give.
Again, self-oriented.
Right? It is. It absolutely is. But in order to be able to give, you also need to give to yourself.
Yeah, and that's actually a really big part of this self-help movement is, don't pour from an empty cup
Absolutely.
analogy and the oxygen mask, right? You hear that a lot, like put it on your oxygen mask first before you help anybody else. Like they're all the same concepts, but it's all about really where are you putting yourself in your relationship? And so, sometimes when people are thinking, well, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to be self-oriented. There's really 3 ways to look at how that can be. And I'm glad that you brought up the narcissists and the sociopaths, because if you are asking yourself, am I a narcissist? Am I a sociopath? The answer is no. The answer is no. It's very simple. True narcissists and sociopaths do not have the capacity to reflect enough to ask themselves that question. So, we can just kibosh that there. We all may have some of those tendencies, but we have the full range of the human experience. So yes, it's something there. But if you have the capacity to ask yourself those questions,
and they probably wouldn't be listening to like a wellness podcast such as Pivotal Moments.
No, you're not doing that. But really, when you think about selfishness or self-oriented, you're talking about 3 different things. So there's good selfish, which is where it's a win-win for everybody. And so that would be you volunteering somewhere to, clean up trash, for example. You win because you feel like you're good and you're doing something. The community wins because you're cleaning up trash at the local park. Like that is a good win-win self-oriented act, right? Then there's the neutral acts, which are the ones that are good for you, but they don't benefit anybody else directly. So if you decide to take a long shower, that's for you. That doesn't harm or benefit anybody else. I mean, the people around you will like that you smell nice, but it's really a neutral act. And so a lot of the self-care items can be considered neutral because they're good for you, but they harm nobody else and don't benefit anybody else. And then there's the selfish acts, which are bad, which would be manipulation, where you're getting your way at the expense of somebody else, which kind of reminded me of somebody who recently had a story that they were sharing with me.
Who could that have been?
Who could that have been? Not the person sitting next to me. But basically, when you have the manipulation, yeah, that is you using your position of power to get your way. That is being the traditional quote unquote selfish that does not get us anywhere and is the one that we really don't want to embody or encourage in anybody, because it doesn't help society. It does not help us. And frankly, if you know that you got your way because you manipulated your way into it, like, I don't know about you, but like I feel dirty afterwards. It's like, oh, what? Yeah, like even in the process. So I try to avoid that.
Oh my God, I still lament on things that happened like 6 years ago. So yeah, I can completely understand and relate to what you're saying right now. And as you're talking, it brings up a question for me is like, why do you think that we feel guilty when we need to take a step back and put ourselves first?
I think part of that has to do with that social constructionism we have been taught, especially as women and women of color, that you have to give. And it is your obligation to do so when you get into certain positions, that you have to give of yourself, that is the way, and, just how women are. And we are not mothers, but mothers experience this to another degree where it's like, oh, your needs no longer matter because now you have given birth to this, little creature, and they must be your priority on all things. And if you are not, if you take a evening to yourself, how dare you?
It's funny you should say that. So growing up, my mom was a single parent. And so she wore this tattered button-up red dress, the thinnest cloth. And, the siblings and I would always say, like, go buy yourself something. But she felt that every dollar she made needed to go back to her kids. But really, her kids wanted her to spend a little money on herself, but she neglected herself. And I think I see that a lot with parents is they neglect their needs for the needs of the kids. And I understand, again, we don't have kids, but I also know that as a child who grew up with a parent that gave everything, like, I wish my mom did more for herself. I really do. And I think kids pick up on that.
I think they do, but then you also learn that, oh, well, this is what it is to be a good parent. This is what it is to give and provide for others, is, running around in tattered clothing or being the last one to eat to make sure everybody is fed. Like, those things there may be a certain level of like income and poverty and other things that we're not really addressing. But yeah, like once your basic needs are met and you're safe, right? You start moving up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and there are other things that need to happen there. And part of that has to be you taking care of your own emotional needs. And you know what? Sometimes like you like getting your nails done, right? Like that makes you feel good. Doesn't benefit anybody else, but like it's okay for you to do that. Like, do you feel guilty getting your nails done?
No, not at all. Nope, because my bills are paid.
Right? And so it's something that you take the time out for yourself to do, and you enjoy it, right? And like I think that's really the hallmark of being self-oriented is, okay, now you enjoy it, you show up to the world the way that you want to show up, which is the best version of yourself. And so going back to your quote, that is what enables you to be more generous, because now you feel good about yourself. Like, yeah, you know what? I did good. Like I went for my morning walk, or, we worked out. Like, I think one of those things, yes, they're good for us, but because we're taking time to be self-oriented and do these things that, nobody cares that we lift weights. Nobody. We care, right? That's it. Like I care because I want to make sure that when I'm old, I have stability and structure in my bones, in my muscles, right? Nobody else cares. Like who else cares, right? But it makes me better when I show up in my group settings, in society, in anything that I want to participate in, if I'm taking that time. Because if not, and you show up, and I've certainly done this where I'm like, I can't believe I skipped that workout today. And then I'm mad that I did that to go to the thing that did not fill my cup.
Absolutely. And you make a good point though. For me, I know that by taking some time for myself to become more self-oriented, I have noticed a shift in several things in my life. And so there are benefits to being self-oriented. One is it improves your mental health. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the price of people pleasing, is self-neglect. And so when you aren't focused on other people's feelings, emotions, and needs, you're better able to identify how you feel and what your emotions that you're going through, your feelings. And then so once you start to identify it, then you can actually provide the space and set up structures that enable you to explore that further, whether that's journaling, meditation, exercise, kind of like what you were talking about, to make sure that you're doing okay. Another benefit that I've noticed, and feel free to chime in, is I've actually found that my relationships are better. Again, pouring from this like empty cup, I wasn't able to give my full self, but I've actually noticed by spending some time for myself, I'm able to be fully present with people because my cup is full. And so people are able to benefit, but this has also enabled me to not only establish, but actually reinforce boundaries. And what Cindy was alluding to earlier, I did have an incident with my mother where a boundary was crossed. However, because I enforced that boundary, we were actually able to talk it out and got a lot further. So I would actually say that the relationship was a lot better. And it was absolutely because I've been putting in the work. Like you and I talk about going to therapy. That's a selfish act, I guess,
A self-oriented act.
Self-oriented. I like it. But again, you're putting in the work, just like I put in the work with my mom this past weekend by reinforcing those boundaries, which resulted in actually a deeper and more meaningful relationship with my mom. Because I guarantee you, we would not have been able to talk like we did, like adults in the past.
But I think you make a really good point with that one because, I'll throw in my mommy issues here.
The season of pivotal moment.
Yeah, that's the season we're in right now. But when I use my filter of, it's either fuck yeah or fuck no, like 90% rule, she texted me before Thanksgiving and was like, hey, do you want to grab lunch? And I was in a good mood. And I was like, well, it's not fuck no. So sure, why not? But it was being self-oriented. It was checking in with me is, do I want to spend this time? Do I want to be in this space? Do I feel like I have the emotional capacity to be around this person? That was all self-oriented. That was me checking, and I had the power to say yes or no. And I tend to usually say no. But in that moment, I was like, you know what? Like, I feel like I'm in a good place to say yes, to show up and do the thing. Did she want something from me? Yes. It was not money, but it was something from me. So it was like, okay, well, that kind of puts a damper on things a little bit, but it was, her also being self-oriented.
Well, so bridging off of my mother's and I argument over the weekend, it was, another benefit is doing more things that you love. So the reason why my mother and I got into I wouldn't even say like a disagreement, I guess is probably the best way. It was because I said no to a certain thing. And the reason why I said no to a certain request that she had of me is because there was something that I wanted to do. So I get seasonal depression. And so I decided I was going to make an effort to, decorate my house for Christmas. And that was going to take some time. And so the request that she had of me was going to impact doing something that I love, which is decorating. So I said no. But by saying no and being self-oriented, I was able to engage in an activity that I love. So I'm really glad that I did that.
Yes. And I think that's a really important point. When you're being self-oriented, it gives you space to do things that you love and get back to things that maybe you neglected with yourself. And so I know for me, like, I had such a crisis when the lockdown was happening, because I thought, man, I'm not going to be able to be creative anymore. Like, my old life of working all the time and just having legal suck up my whole life is going to make all of this go away. And it was hard. Like, I was ugly crying in my living room, y'all. It was real, because I felt like, man, like, here's something that I love so much and that I just enjoy being in this space. And it wasn't even like one creative thing. I was cookie decorating, I was painting, I was drawing, I was, starting to play with video content creation. And I had to be self-oriented in that moment and just say, no, I'm not giving up these things that make me feel like myself, like my full self, in service of something that I feel like is not doing it for me anymore.
You bring up an excellent point, which is when you become more self-oriented, I feel like you're able to live with like greater intention. So when you're focused on you, you're able to, find things that you enjoy doing, but you also can actually begin to take steps towards some of the goals you have. So for me recently, my boss doesn't know this, but good thing she doesn't listen. I actually started applying for jobs. And I realized that maybe the reason why I stayed, one, it was comfort, right? The status quo. Blech. But it was also to appease my boss. Like, I had this like huge sense of loyalty, again, this people pleasing and staying in places that maybe no longer serve me. And I was like, you know what? This is no longer serving me. I have financial and life goals that I want to accomplish, and I can't accomplish them here. So I'm taking initiative and being more self-oriented, and I'm applying for jobs. So
yes. Can we get a round of applause there, Ron?
That's huge.
It is huge.
It's huge.
It is huge. And I think that even just getting to that point of realizing I have goals and I have things that I want to accomplish, and damn it, I deserve to be able to do that. I think that's huge.
Well, and I found that through this process of self-orientation that I'm actually starting to unearth like my self-worth. And it allows me to explore things of like why I matter, which, as Cydia knows, is really big for me. So we did, I'm always like looking for people's acceptance and stuff like that. But when you're a people pleaser and you're looking for people's acceptance, that's an external stimuli, right? And and it just led me to stress and anxiety. But I realized that I need to do things for me. I need to do what makes me happy. And because of that, I'm able to find my voice. I'm able to amplify it. I'm able to engage in things that I normally wouldn't have. And this past year has really built my self-worth. And that's because of this self-orientation path that I've been on probably for the last year and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to witness. That's for sure. But I do think that increasing your self-worth and increasing your self-orientation does help you be firmer with your boundaries, firmer with, setting time aside for things that you want for yourself and paying attention to what are maybe your triggers, what are things that are getting you out of alignment. And so I really do think that really reframing selfishness to self-orientation, if that is what's going to help you really embrace the fact that you fucking matter and what you love matters. Doesn't matter if it benefits anybody else. If it's just for you, that is okay, because you're going to be happier and that is going to have ripple effects through the rest of society. So I'm all for it.
So I know that there's several ways that we can become more self-oriented, but let's, and what works for me isn't going to work for you, dear listeners. So you have to find what works for you. But Cydia, if you had maybe one suggestion to give people in terms of how maybe you've become more self-oriented, what would you say that is?
I would say my threshold, my 90% rule. I go back to that one because it's a pretty high standard, and then you can decide how you want that standard. But if I'm not 90% excited about this, the answer is no. And that filter has really helped me throughout so many different things. And sometimes you feel like, you know what, you can't say no. And I get that. But then that's a moment for me to do some introspection. Okay, why is it that I don't want to do this? What is the exchange here that I'm making? But I think for me, being 90% excited about it is just another way of saying, hey, am I self-oriented here? Is this 90% excited, Cydia? If not, the answer is no.
I would say for me, it would probably be unplugging and spending time with myself. Not in that fun way, though. It's literally I'm trying not to feel obligated with feeling just empty space. I'm trying to be good about not working outside of office hours. I'm really taking time to just recharge. And I find, because I think if you've listened, dear listener, to previous episodes, I talk about how I always feel the need to have to do something. And because I'm always doing something, I'm neglecting my own needs. But it's just been so nice to just put in an audiobook, play Sudoku, nothing in particular. I mean, I might not accomplish anything, but that sense of peace and fulfillment that I have, after I'm done completing a book, is just so rewarding to me.
We were actually not put on this earth to accomplish a bunch of tasks. I don't know what we were put on here for, but I know it wasn't.
It's not that.
It's not to be these productive machines and constantly doing. Being is a big part of being a human being.
I think one tip that I think that I would like to work on myself is just saying no. And I did that this weekend. It didn't go as well as I would have liked it to go, but it was definitely a learning lesson. One thing as a people pleaser is no is a complete sentence. And I think that I was well, no, I can't do it because blah, 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 blah. But I think if you're looking to be more self-oriented, you have to prioritize yourself, like you said. And I find that no is good.
No is fantastic. And there's a couple of different ways that you can learn to say no without actually saying the word no, if that would make you feel better.
It would.
I'll have to get back to you on that. Or thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm not able to attend.
All right, I'm just going to have you send out all my correspondence.
There's a couple more. I'm thinking off the cuff, so I'm trying to think of other ways that I've said no. Because if I find myself trying to explain why I can't do it, I just have to shorten it. Nobody really cares about all of the reasons. They just want to know, are you in or are you out? Right? Can you do this or can you not? And be actually, you know what? It's bad timing. Nope. Maybe next time. Maybe next time is one of mine.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I can't do lunch this time. Maybe next time. Keep me in mind in the future. Just as long as we're keeping that door open. At some point, though, some people are going to think, well, you're avoiding me, and they may stop reaching out. So there is that consequence. But just being aware that that's something that could happen. That's all right.
So what is it that you'd like our listeners to walk away with? So it's okay to be selfish.
Well, selfish is not a bad word. It's okay to be self-oriented.
That's better.
And really, we're talking about prioritizing yourself. Where are you on your to-do list? Are you even on your to-do list? If not, you really need to reevaluate that and make sure that you are at the top of your list today, tomorrow, and for always.
That's it for this episode. Find us on Instagram at Pivotal Moments HQ for all the behind the scenes and sister-like banter you know and love. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR and Pug Productions podcast.